On a day when Gujarat former Congress leader Hardik Patel has joined the BJP, the discontent within the Congress party over its Rajya Sabha nominations appears to grow as questions are asked about why the candidate selection has been the way it has been. The one pattern that emerges from the names that have been sent to the Rajya Sabha is the tag of outsider. Even in the old critical state of Rajasthan, there are three representatives who aren't from the state at all. Remember, this is a state where the Chintan Shivir was held and where the Congress has a serious problem of factionalism. In Uttar Pradesh, where the Congress has two legislators, three members have been sent to the Rajya Sabha. Several Congress leaders, who are in fact known for their loyalty to the party, have gone public with their disappointment and their discontent, some expressing it directly, some expressing it through irony and humor. This is on a day when the BJP appears to have dropped Mukhtar Abbas Nakhvi, the only Muslim minister in the cabinet. At least so far, there's no mention of his name on the Rajya Sabha names released by the BJP. And if this remains the case, then by July, there will be no Muslim face of the BJP even in parliament. There are three right now, but their terms are due to expire. Let's introduce our guests as we try and understand the thinking behind the Congress's Rajya Sabha nominations and, of course, the larger debate around whether the Congress is going to change or not going to change. Let's introduce our guest today. Sandip Ghosh, commentator and a columnist, is with us. Smita Gupta, veteran journalist and columnist, is with us. Dr. Shruti Kapila, who's of course a professor at Cambridge University. We most recently saw her in conversation with Mr. Rahul Gandhi at the university, is with us. Welcome. And also joining us is Anita Katyal, another veteran journalist. We are told that the Congress spokesperson will be joining us in a few minutes from now, but I wanted to get the ball rolling so as to respect the time of our guests. Let me start with you, Smita, if I may. If you had to look for a larger pattern, I tried to look for some of them. They're reasonably obvious. UP, the state where the Congress did dismally, sends three members to parliament. Rajasthan has three politicians from outside the state. In Haryana, if you look at an Ajay Makan, he's from outside the state. And so it goes. The outsider tag is quite big in this list, Smita. What leaps out at you at the choice of Rajya Sabha nominees by the Congress party?
I think the Rajya Sabha tickets in the Congress have been given to the loyalists. The only one from the G23 who has made it to the list is Mukul Vasnik, but I think he realized his mistake. He's made up, and so he's there on the list. The other thing that leaps out at me is that given that Randeep Surjewala is from Haryana, he has been nominated from Rajasthan, whereas Ajay Makan has been nominated from Haryana, which means that Bhupinder Singh Hooda still holds his own in Haryana. Everybody knows that Hooda and Surjewala belong to different camps, but he has been strong enough to hold his own and has obviously refused to let Surjewala be nominated from their home state of Haryana. It and we also see, I mean, the names that are not there. I mean, you have Ghulam Nabi Azad and Anand Sharma, who, along with Kapil Sibal, who, as we know, has already left the party, they were the moving spirits behind the G23, the group of MPs who wrote a letter to Mrs. Gandhi 2 years ago, expressing dissatisfaction with the leadership and the functioning of the party. Their names are not there. So, I mean, that's a space we have to watch, because there has been talk for a while that Ghulam Nabi Azad has been toying with the idea of starting a new political party in Jammu and Kashmir. Will he do that, or will he just keep quiet? We don't know. It also makes very clear that the Chintan Shivir has had no impact, but I'm not surprised, because what happened at the Chintan Shivir? There was no Chintan. Those 6 groups that were formed to discuss politics, economics, etc., they were all structured discussions. They were not freewheeling discussions at all, where people would have been able to say what they wanted about what was wrong with the party. I mean, for instance, the political group apparently had subjects: Kashmir, Northeast, communalism, etc., etc. So I mean that means all you can do is to talk about the BJP. I mean the Congress is a long way away from challenging the BJP. It needs to fix its own house, put its own house in order
But
before.
can I just come in to say that you spoke about missing names, and most of the ones you mentioned as missing were from the mildly mutinous, which is how I describe the group of 23, mildly mutinous group of 23. I don't think anyone's going to criticize the Congress for not giving space to Ghulam Nabi Azad and Anand Sharma. I think it's the others who are missing. And they've made their discontent clear on Twitter. Let's bring up the most prominent loyalist on prime time every evening, Pawan Khera. You look at Pawan Khera on Twitter, and he very sort of obviously made his discontent clear. And no one can call him someone who's flirting with the idea of leaving and so on. And he's from Rajasthan. Instead, you had three others from other states representing, his state. Then there's Nagma, who speaks very openly about. I guess she expected to be somewhat of a Muslim faith. She questions why another colleague gets that seat. And then, of course, there's Milind Deora. Can we bring that up as well? Milind Deora, who actually chose to use humor, but the irony was lost on nobody about what he was talking about. And you even had a Maharashtra Congress leader quit today in protest against how these nominations have been made. And you have Manish Tiwari actually questioning whether the Rajya Sabha should be abolished. So, there's all kinds of murmurs that are taking place here. I'm also seeing Naseer Saab of the Congress Party, Dr. Syed Naseer Hussain, join us. Welcome to the program. He's a Congress leader and a parliamentarian and a national spokesperson of the party. Can I get your reactions? The Congress often thinks the media is less than fair to it, but the criticism today has come from within the party. The questions are being asked by many of your own colleagues. Where is the young blood? Where are the lessons of the Chintan Shivar as reflected in this list? Naseer, what would you say?
Barkha, thank you so much for getting me on your team to discuss this issue. I think one should understand that the Congress party during this round of Rajya Sabha elections didn't have much of a space and much of what you called spots to be given to people from different states. There are a lot many people those are working in the party. I agree with all the names that you have taken. They're all good friends of mine. They have worked in the party for a long time. They are very effective defenders of the party. They have slogged day in and day out to defend the party. But at the end of the day, then you can only have 10 people for 10 positions that are there in Rajya Sabha. Had we been there in power for, say, another three, four, or 5 states, maybe all these names that are being there on your screen could have been accommodated. Pawan Khara has been a dear friend. He has been there for long in the party. I also worked as a spokesperson for almost 8 years. After I finished my university days and I started working in the Congress party, I became an MP after working for 18 long years in the party. I was stationed in Delhi for a long time, though I am from Karnataka. You know that. So
Yes.
many are there who are equally good. Many are there who may be better than many those you got in. But at the end of the day, there are permutations and combinations. There is a thought process. We need to fight elections in some states. We need to fight election in 2024. So lots of thought process has gone in. People may say that they are from the Kotri. People may say they are Darbaris. People may call all kinds of names. But at the end of the day, you should also look at the list. Except Mr. Jairam Ramesh, who does lots of background work, and Mr. Vivek Thanka, all of them have contested elections. Some have contested 4, 5, 6. Some have contested 8, 10, 12 elections. And they have won elections. They have been there in the state politics. They have been there in assemblies and Lok Sabha. Many of them are there coming for the Rajya Sabha for the first time. We need lots of mature, sensible, experienced voices
Okay.
to
And Dr.
counter BJP, to articulate our this thing in BJP in Rajya Sabha. I think that's the reason why all of them are there.
I just want to briefly ask you before going to Shruti, is Dr. Hussain, fair enough that somebody like yourself, you did the long wait, you put in the hours, it took you 18 years before you became an MP. But this is a time when the Congress is perceived by many of its critics or even people who may want an option to the BJP of carrying deadwood, of not making a generational shift. How would you respond to the criticism that, let's pick up Rajasthan, that all three of the MPs nominated to the Rajya Sabha don't even come from Rajya Sabha? I understand that I beg your pardon, don't even come from Rajasthan. I understand that the Rajya Sabha is not a directly contested house, but even so, this is a state where the stakes are very high for the Congress, aren't they?
Yeah, Barkha, I think I would call this list as not so young, not so old kind of a list which has lots of youth and lots of experience in that. They have been aggressively working for the party, defending the party at various levels. Now, let us take the case of Rajasthan for 8 long years. He knows every district, he knows every block, he knows every congressman there. We need him there stationed to manage the entire election when the election comes. Mr.
Who were
Ranjit
you
Singh
talking
Surjewala,
about?
who is from the
We missed who you were talking about. Your audio
I,
went away for a second.
I was sorry, I was talking about Mr. Mukul Vasnik. He was
Right.
in charge of the state for 8 years. He knows every congressman. He knows that every block, district, everywhere. He has traveled to the length and breadth of the state. He knows everyone. So now we want him there to plan and strategize for the election for the next few months, so that before the election comes, we are ready for the election. Mr. Ranjit Singh Surjewala was our pointsman. He was our strategist there when we were in a crisis on more than two, three occasions. He is from the neighboring state, and he has been our face of the party at the national level for the past 6, 8 years, handling the media and communication department. So I
Okay.
would say, most of these people, those who have gone to different states, we wanted to accommodate Ajay Makanji. He has been accommodated in the neighboring state of what you call Haryana. Now you may say, why 3 people from Uttar Pradesh when you have lost the election? So we have definitely lost the election in Uttar Pradesh, but that doesn't mean we want to write off Uttar Pradesh. We want some people from there, some serious, mature people from there, so that they can go back into Uttar Pradesh and they can revive our party
Okay.
there. So lots of
Let's
thinking is there. I don't want to go into the details of why we have done this, but they have been done with lots of thinking in that.
Okay, two completely different perspectives on the same list from Smita Gupta and from Dr. Hussain of the Congress Party. Let me take this now to Dr. Shruti Kapila, and then I'll come to the others. Shruti, I want to start by asking you, if one paid attention to Rahul Gandhi's conversation with you and even some of the other public events he had in London, it's quite clear that whatever comes next in the Congress is going to be Rahul Gandhi's vision for the Congress, which is not the same as what is loosely called the old guard of the party. At least that's, my impression. If that is the case, why do we see so much of kind of an old guard stamp, as it were, on this list? As I told Smita, I don't think anyone's going to bother too much about Anand Sharma, Ghulam Nabi Azad, Kapil Sibal has already left. It's the Pavan Kheras, the Milind Dioras, the Nagmas, the people who could still go elsewhere, the people who still have fire in their belly and have been loyalists to the party. Shruti, go ahead.
Thanks for asking me, Barkha. There are 2 questions underlying what you've asked. One is actually the future direction of the party under Rahul Gandhi's leadership. And I think one of the first thing to say is that I think I don't know how much congressmen and women have realized that it is no longer the party of power. And so jostling for Rajya Sabha seats is actually tawdry. This is not the moment for power grabbing for seats. This is a moment for actually doing the hard graft, going to the people, and actually launching a movement, which is what Mr. Gandhi wants to do. I mean, he's declared it in Cambridge itself. So it is going to become a party of protest, but it has all these people who are habituated, I think, of looking at the Congress as a party of power, and where there's patronage to be given or goodies to be given by the leadership. And I think it's a kind of transitional moment, as you rightly put it. There are people who want those berths. I actually think that the Rajya Sabha has become an albatross for the Congress. It is actually counterproductive at the moment for it to remake itself. And I think those are and mean, I think that's really the basic, that's the kind of, in a way, the bottom line, that I don't think that, you can really read too much into Congress politics through these nominations. These are actually, belong, as you put it rightly, torjor of an older calculation. That calculation is not in place, not simply because of Rahul Gandhi. That's also not in place because look at where the Congress is in terms of the electoral map. It needs to actually revive itself with the people. And for that, getting a berth here or there is not going to take you very far. You're going to have to go to the people. You're going to have to kind of seek a popular mandate. You're going to have to do the hard work of protest. So I think the sooner the Congress figures, whether they're in the G23, whether they're in the old guard, whether they are 40-something or 20-something, realize this, the better it will be for its future.
Are you basically, that Shruti, making the point that the Rajya Sabha nominations, whether you agree, disagree, doesn't matter, they don't matter to the future of the Congress?
I think they matter to the extent that they have really distracted, say, the political headlines, or they've distracted the work that needs to be done. If you're going to be a serious opposition, credible opposition in an election, should you really be kind of spending hours in discussions about who goes where, which faction to be accommodated? You've just had the G23 saga for 2 years, which is already like a soap opera at this point. I mean, you've got like a really hard job to do. You have to find, you can get glimmers of what Rahul Gandhi wants to do for the future, but if you're going to be distracted, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, precisely because of this kind of gridlock system of this very grand old party. It's a highly bureaucratized and highly administered, to me, it seems like an overly bureaucratized structure from the outside. And it has all these people who have not seemed to have smelt the coffee, that there is no power and goodies to be distributed.
So I think this is a very interesting and different point, Sandip, that there's too much energy and hand-wringing that congressmen and women are actually spending on these nominations, that this is not the conversation that the Congress should even be having about itself. Sandip, let's bring you in. Sandip's on mute. Sandip, just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Barkha, we must realize that, Congress is not in normal times. It is going through an existential crisis. And therefore, their choices will be determined by some very, very current, exigencies, rather than what you would say the normal calculation. Our colleague from the Congress said a very key term that, we have to win 2024 elections. And what is one of the key factors for winning 2024 elections? It, to my mind, and a political outsider, one of the biggest problem Congress today has is resource mobilization. So number of these people, I'm using a euphemistic term, as all will get, number of these people bring that in. That's why you have people like Rajiv Shukla coming from a state like Chhattisgarh, or any of the other names I don't need to go in. So they had to be accommodated, because without these, people who have got clout in the external environment, Congress is in trouble. That's the same reason why, when this whole 3 committees were formed post the Chintan Shivir, if you see the most powerful committee, again had people who are all mostly 70 plus. You could perhaps count just 1 or 2 people who are below that age. And despite talking about new blood, everything, these are the kind of people there to bring in. So Congress really cannot, they're caught in a situation when they cannot, take those radical or drastic decisions at this point in time.
Why does this list matter, Sandip? Why does it matter?
It's because of just, it's a question of survival. They don't have today the appetite or the guts to go and take big risks and gamble by taking on young people, and in the process antagonizing some of these people who unfortunately hold the purse strings today. Ghulam Nabi Azad and Anand Sharma may have become less important, but people like Mr. Chidambaram and others are also, for whatever it's worth, they're holding certain power strings. Secondly, Barkha, if you see the composition of this list, there are very clear three axes emerging. There's a Priyanka axis, There is a Sonia axis and there is a Rahul axis. People who are, so that balancing act is also happening. Contrary to what we all like to believe, I don't think Rahul Gandhi is yet calling the shots over everybody. Sonia Gandhi.
This is an interesting question because indeed in the nomination, Anita, let's say of a Randeep Surjewala from Rajasthan, there are Congress watchers who would say that is the veto exercised by a Bhupinder Hooda from Haryana who will not allow a Surjewala to rise on his home turf. And we could keep deconstructing like this. But I think it's also important to stick to the big picture. I think Shruti raises a very interesting point. Is this like looking for a needle in a haystack? Does this even matter? Is it going to make or break the Congress in any way? Or is it just a media distraction? Anita, your take.
Thanks, Barkha, for having me here. I would like to point out one thing that the main takeaway from this whole list is that, okay, some people are unhappy. It's bound to happen. You know, some individuals are disappointed that they have not been accommodated, which happens all the time. But the big message is that the Gandhis are important. It's their interests which have to be protected. That is paramount. The party does not matter. And that is what happened at the Chintan Shivar as well. The Chintan Shivar was supposed to be for introspection, for looking forward, for charting out a roadmap for the future, and so on and so forth. But actually, it was all just a matter of silencing the critics for a while, buying time, and just holding on, you know, till Rahul Gandhi is kind of ready to take on the mantle once again. In this particular case, the Rajya Sabha nominations, I think one thing is very clear. Rahul Gandhi has had his say. Surjewala and Ajay Makan are his nominees. I think they've all kind of done a little batwara between the three of them. And I don't think there are any differences there. But I would like to say also, take up from what the others have said, that yes, the party is not in power. But because it is not in power, you know, this list matters. Because you also need to use this to send out messages. And so you need to do a balancing act between merit and caste considerations and regional aspirations. And that has not happened. Otherwise, for instance, at the Chintan Shivar, there was a view and it was pledged. And in that resolution, there was a huge long reference to social justice and how accommodation of OBCs and social scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and tribals. And Rahul Gandhi is going all out to woo them. I mean, he's had 3-4 rallies in Rajasthan and in Gujarat, but there's not a single tribal which has been included in this list. Similarly, there's just one Muslim and one woman.
Well, I mean, I just also do want to underline that this is a day when Mukhtar Abbas Nakhvi has not found a place on the BJP list, and if the BJP doesn't, sticks to this plan, then as I said in the opening, by July, our ruling party will have not a single Muslim in parliament. So I just want to also underline that while we are making the point and the important point about diversity and inclusion, I do want to bring in Smita and then Shruti and then.
1 minute. Mukhtar
Yes,
Ahmed, Nakhvi, don't be surprised if you get the Lok Sabha seat.
I agree. There is some talk, and that's why I'm doing an if and but here, that he could actually be sent to contest a bypoll, and I do want to underline that about Mr. Nakhvi. But I'm just saying, I'm just sort of caveating it, Sandip, and that point is well taken. That I don't know. I'm just raising the question because MJ Akbar's term is scheduled to end. And, you will be, if Mr. Nakhvi doesn't contest that bypoll, then we'll have to see what happens. Before I come back to Shruti and Smita, and Sandip, that point is well taken, to Dr. Hussain, does the list matter? Does it not matter? I think it matters if you have disgruntled people who otherwise are not disgruntled. You know, in any organization, if some of your best colleagues are upset, then you have to pause and notice. These are not the perennially disgruntled people who are complaining. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, let's say, about a Pawan Khera. Dr. Hussain.
Barkha, I'll put this question to you. And I'll ask you, like you have 20 extremely good colleagues of yours who have been working day and night, and you have only 10 positions. What will you do?
I mean, I honestly have to say that at the cost of being called ruthless, I would promote, even if the youngest was the best one, I would promote the youngest. If the oldest was still the most valuable, I would promote the oldest. I don't think I would go by age. I think I would go by what the need was of the organization. That's what I would do.
See, I think that is what. See, when I say there has been a lot of thinking before getting on to this decision, I really mean that their utility, resource mobilization, and their utility in different. So many things have been discussed. Only after that, this list has come. And I tell you, every time, every 2 years, there will be some dissatisfaction here and there because the number of seats will be less and the aspirants will be more. And I also don't understand when you people speak about that Batwara hua hai. You tell me, can Mr. Chidambaram ji, Mr. Jairam Ramesh ji, Randeep Singh Surjewala ji, Ajay Makan, can they be into some group here, Priyanka Gandhi ji group and Rahul Gandhi ji group or Sonia Gandhi ji group? I think they're all above all these things. They have been slogging and working for the party day in and day out. A day and night. I don't think they
Okay.
are because of somebody else there. They are there because of their hard work and their utility for the party in the next years to come. And also one
Okay.
important thing, see, Rajya
Yes.
Sabha has been a happening place for the past few years. Now we need people who can articulate our viewpoints there in Rajya Sabha. That is from where Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha the messaging happens. And now we have only a limited number of seats in Lok Sabha. And when we come for another limited number of seats in Rajya Sabha, we need to have the best facers and the people who can articulate there. Maybe one or two may not be the best articulators, but then you will have to mix and match and do permutations and combinations before that. And also one more point. You people don't speak about the BJP MPs coming from other states. There have been then Venkaiah Naidu was from Karnataka, though he's from Andhra Pradesh. Nirmala Sitharaman is Karnataka for the second time. There have been n number of MPs from different parties. Now I think JDU candidate is not from Bihar. JDU candidate is from Jharkhand.
From Jharkhand.
So
Yes.
so and
True.
Mukhtar Abbas Nakhvi himself was from Jharkhand, not from Uttar Pradesh. So
Yeah.
this has been there for a long time in all the parties. Now, because a couple of more people are there from states, I think this question is arising now.
Okay, I think those are reasonable points that you make, that there's a inordinate amount of media focus on the Congress and not in a similar way on the BJP, and that's something open for discussion. But then, Shruti, I guess the point that would be made is that it's the nature of the beast, that the party that is struggling is the one that gets deconstructed more, because that's the party that needs to rise up more than the party that's already enjoying powers, so to speak. I'm more interested in the larger question. There's a difference of a perspective in this panel on whether this is one Gandhi's imprint, three Gandhi's imprint, or whether this shows it's Gandhi's, as Anita Katyal said, that matter more than the party. Do you see any pattern in that? Do you see any pattern emerging of a generational shift, or none at all?
Okay, let me first say something on the BJP itself and its list, since not much comment has been made apart from the unfortunate possibility that the BJP might not have a Muslim representative very soon, possibly. But I think one forgets that actually what Congress is dealing with is actually a very complex family opposite it, which is the RSS, the BJP, and the VHP. Now, these are also three contenders within the big Hindutva parivar. And no one is actually kind of trying to break it down for the general public, which side has weighed on this list. Because that should be telling, and that should also be important, because 2025 is the 100th year of the RSS. And as an observer of Indian politics, I would be interested on that deconstruction, which side, which aspect of the BJP's very kind of say complex and deep institutional structure is winning. Is it the cadre? Is it the RSS? Is it the BJP? On the parliament, I have to say that the much discussion was had in actually Cambridge, that how actually lots of questions got asked, that how actually parliament itself has become degraded in the last few years in India. That the opposition, there hasn't been a kind of holding of the government to power. Having said that, let me say something about, which is to say that, all these Rajya Sabha things seem to me, as I said, very distracting and not really hitting the bullseye where maybe the political drift of the country where the political drift might be landing us soon. on the Congress, I think there is obviously a shift. There is obviously a shift for everyone to see. Whether it's Mr. Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, who is going to lead it a bit more centrally, but I think his by going by the conversation, I think his interest has been always a movement, a popular movement, a Gandhian movement. And on the family, I who better to quote but Prashant Kishore on your show, who actually said, look, this is a family which has a kind of brand value, which is unprecedented, unparalleled. And why would any party want to give up its greatest brand value? I mean, and so it's factionalism. I'm not privy to Delhi gossip.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Cambridge. You guys are better placed to know who's in, who's out. Frankly, it doesn't interest me. What I'm interested in is seeing the wider patterns, as you are asking, and the wider pattern is exactly a protest movement, a kind of new kind of mobilization, a recruitment drive, and how that stitches up to, as I said, these really hyper bureaucratized Congress circles. That's time will tell.
Yeah.
At the same time, let's balance it out. Let's balance it out a little bit to hear from the BJP side too. Like, who is prevailing? Which faction is prevailing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Sandip, there's a fair question there, and then I'll come to you, Smita, sorry, about the BJP list, the BJP having its share of outsiders, some examples given by Dr. Hussain. And I think there's no, it kind of goes by without a blip because I guess the party that is in crisis gets deconstructed more. Rajya Sabha nominations have never been scrutinized. The BJP Rajya Sabha nominations were not scrutinized in this way. What do you think explains that, Sandip? Sandip, unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
First of all, you're labeling me as a BJP spokesperson.
No. As I always say, you're a supporter of the Prime Minister, not the BJP, which is how you describe yourself. But go ahead. Yes.
Shruti, Congress, spokesperson, I think it'll be as unfair as that. See, there are two parts to the BJP.
1 minute. Shruti's trying to say something. I'll just let her interject there, and then you can make your point. Yes.
I said, this is on you. This is not on me. This can't be compared.
There are two parts. BJP list will definitely, I think, calls for a dissection and understanding. What I see most importantly in BJP, irrespective of which side is pulling, they are consciously promoting newer talent. They are building the next generation of leaders coming in, and they are consciously, superannuating some of the older people, not giving them, say, Ravi Shankar Prasad or
Javadekar was dropped.
Yeah. So they are not being given a new lease of life just because they have been there and they've got a lot of, bench room to offer people. So that is where BJP scores, I think, far better than Congress in having a very clear succession planning which goes down the line. And in fact, by the same token, I would say the point which was being made earlier, saying that, Congress has got so few seats in the Rajya Sabha, what does it do? It has to give it to a few people. In fact, that is why all the more, people who are aspiring, people who are the future, you have to give them some carrot, Barkha. As I keep repeating myself from a corporate standpoint, today, career shelf lives in any profession are shortening. Nobody, if you were to tell your junior, since that example was given, that you wait on when I will retire, then you can take on the mantle of, they will not wait for you. They'll move on somewhere else because people know they need. So similarly with politicians, one thing is this, people who are past sell-by date, who may not go anywhere else, but the people, younger people who have aspiration, they will at some point in time.
This is a very interesting point you've made, and I'll tell you why. Because Hardik Patel, who's of course joined the BJP today, before he left the Congress, he said, Smita, two things to me in an interview. He said, one, that Rahul Gandhi must understand that those who leave the Congress are not all bika hua ya dara hua. Those who leave the party are not all sold out or fearful. The other point he made was that people keep telling me, wait. Dr. Hussain made this point right now about how he waited 18 years. He said, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait. Why should I wait? And I think this point made by Sandip is very interesting, that do you reward those who are past their sell-by date electorally to you, or do you look to contain, at least in your poll-bound states, Gujarat and Rajasthan, a certain degree of this? You don't know that you're going to win, but at least you stem the discontent and not make the mistake that was made in Punjab, where it kind of all unraveled on the eve of the elections, some would say. Smita.
No, I agree with you. In Gujarat, I think the Congress party has made a complete mess, because if you look back at the 2017 Gujarat Assembly elections, it was because of the rise of three young independent leaders, Hardik Patel, Jignesh Mevani, and Alpesh Thakur, that the atmosphere changed. And the sort of discontent against the BJP became more visible, and the Congress was able to take a certain advantage out of it. And subsequently, all three young men joined the Congress at different stages. But today, what has happened? Alpesh Thakur is back in the BJP. Jignesh Mevani is still there, but Hardik Patel has also joined the BJP. And without them, I mean, there's nothing new in the Gujarat Congress, because the generation of leaders that is leading the party, the generation of Arjun Mudvadia, Shakti Singh Gohil, etc., they have repeatedly lost Lok Sabha elections. I went to Gujarat recently and I talked to some of these leaders, and I said that at that point Hardik was just unhappy. And they said, oh, when you join a big party like the Congress, then you have to, follow the discipline. But the point is that while the younger men were very conscious of the fact that the only way to take on the BJP is to hit the streets, these people are still sitting, in their own studios, in their own homes. So, in fact, we were discussing the Rajya Sabha seats. The Rajya Sabha seats may be, okay, you can say that they are not terribly important. But as the Speaker, Mr. Sandip Ghosh just said, I agree with him that when the BJP, appoints people, there is a game plan. We can see there's a game plan that, okay, this generation, we need to get newer faces. We need to, express diversity. We don't need a Muslim, perhaps, because, that's not our agenda. But what was the game plan beyond personal loyalties or, in the Congress?
That's a fair point. Yeah. Is there any thinking to this list, or is it just a kind of balancing act? Anita. Sorry.
One other point I wanted to make.
Sure.
Dr. Kapila talked about the fact that, we should be talking about actually how to rebuild the Congress. I agree with her entirely on that, but that has to begin from that is what the G23 letter was all about. That is what Prashant Kishore was talking to them about. But the way the Chintan Shivir, where all this should have been discussed, how to rebuild the party, how to, first look at the mistakes that they've made so that they can start refunctioning.
Let me bring in Shruti Kapila for a brief interjection, and then I'll come to Anita.
Sorry, just very, very briefly. I don't agree that the G23 was in any way productive. It was a straightforward factional fight, which really sounded like a complaint of like older men who were unwilling to take on a younger leadership. And no, I mean, let me just complete. And I mean, and it's gone on for 2 years, and it was also a lack of recognition, as I said, where the party really was at. They were like shouting to be heard without having anything substantial to say where they could go. Actually, India is going through a major churning about its identity. Every Indian is going through that churning. I think we should question why the likes of Hardik Patel find it so easy to move in from the Congress one day and to a Hindu majoritarian party the other day without a batting of a heartbeat. And for a panelist here to say, oh, well, we know what the BJP is about. It doesn't want a Muslim agenda. So they're very clear. How is such an aggressive, exclusivist policy being given a kind of free pass?
Okay, let me get Smita to respond with the caveat.
There are in India's identity, which is not just restricted to the Congress. It is an identity crisis for every Indian.
Smita and then Anita, with the caveat that we do not know that Mukhtar Abbas Nakhvi will be contesting the bypoll in UP. I just want to keep underlining that caveat just to be accurate on facts. Smita, please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. you may dismiss the G23 as a bunch of old fogies who have nothing to contribute to the party. But I'm saying, look at what they said. There was nothing wrong in what they said. What they said should have been taken seriously. If you can point out something in that, because nobody was asking for any personal favors in that, whatever
Were they
their,
not also asking for accommodation for themselves in the kind of Rajya Sabha list that we've seen
no, they
today,
were not,
Smita?
not in the letter, not in the
Why
letter.
would a Kapil Sibal go to the Samajwadi Party? Quite clearly because the Congress was not willing to give him a Rajya Sabha seat. I mean, he's a
No,
good example.
but beyond
I mean,
that,
how
if you,
tawdry to just move to the SP and go on to and this is you're a senior.
I'm not
Supreme
supporting
Court.
any of these people. I'm just saying that if you cover the Congress party, as Anita and I have been doing day in and day out, you have to talk to people every day. People move from a point of, it's total hopelessness. There are
Yeah,
young
I think
people
that's an important point. I think that's an important point you're
it's
making
a
about the
total
mood
sense
within
of
the
total
party. Yes.
hopelessness.
Yeah.
So then after that, then people say, okay, then let me just take care of myself. And some
Let,
people just wither away in the
let me
corner.
bring in Anita. Let me bring in Anita. She's been waiting a
I
long
was
time to
not
make a point.
justifying Hardik Patel's shift to the BJP. And I think that itself, this whole question of ideology, which is the most important thing that the Congress should have tackled. The Congress, what does it stand for ideologically today? Tell me that. I
Okay,
mean, even it's
can I bring
around
in Anita? I
all
think you all
righteous.
raised you both raised a lot of meta questions. Let's bring in Anita Katyal on the specifics of what we're talking about, and then
Majoritarian? Yeah, it's certainly that much is clear. Whether you are willing to listen, give it attention or not is a separate matter. This much
okay,
is clear that the Congress is anti-Hindu majoritarianism.
okay. Let me bring in Anita on that, and then the others. Anita, please go ahead.
Not in many of its
Okay,
actions.
Smita and Shruti, 1 minute. Let me just bring in Anita. She's been waiting a long time. Anita, please go ahead. Yes.
No. I don't want to kind of contribute to this because this can kind of go on and on. I agree with Smita on some points, and I agree on Dr. Kapila on other points, because I agree that what Smita said, that people were really desperate and demoralized, and nobody was listening to them, and they felt that you had to do something to shake up the party. And but there was also an underlying agenda. I wouldn't say that. I would say that rather. That there were people who were looking for accommodation, and they were looking for Rajya Sabha seats, and the fact is that as you can see, what happened with as you yourself mentioned with Kapil Sibal. So and there was also a subtext to that G23 letter, that the message was that Rahul Gandhi is not delivering, and he needs to we need a new leader from preferably a non-Gandhi. But of course, that was not stated. And when Kapil Sibal said that, then of course, that was the end of matters.
But I think you've dived into something we haven't spoken about. That does this list with its imprint of who of who's in command settle that leadership issue, or the theory bazi around the leadership issue permanently. Let me take that to Sandip, then Dr. Hussain, and then I'll give Shruti the last word. Sandip, it's one thing, Shruti calls it tawdry, to say that you'd move parties because you didn't get another term at Rajya Sabha. Prashant Kishore, interestingly, one of his proposals to the Congress was to cap the number of Rajya Sabha terms that could be given to one person. Just a little detail there. Sandip, go ahead.
See, Barkha, what you're saying, all these cap, etc., can happen only when you're in total control, when the party is in a stable situation, like in BJP. Then you can make those reforms. I think people should drop any illusion that they will have anybody at the helm other than the Gandhis. I don't think that is either feasible or even desirable, I would say. Who is there in the Congress today below the ranks of the Gandhi who really have the heft or the clout or even organizational ability to run a party of that? So for good or for bad, it has to be the Gandhis. Their issue will be where they'll have to display astuteness is how they select the aides around them. Who are the people supporting them? That's how Congress has functioned even earlier. And that's where Rahul Gandhi probably displays a certain degree of lack of judgment or choice rather than going for people by capability or competence. He tends to choose them for other attributes. I think But I personally never buy this theory that it's possible to replace the Gandhis today and put somebody else in charge. It will not work. It'll, in fact, ensure dismantling or the disintegration of the party much sooner. So those are, I think, all secondary considerations to my mind. And where the party is missing is they're not able to see the Gandhis, this larger picture, and take some of these steps. I don't know whether it's the conservatism of Sonia Gandhi. She doesn't want to upset the apple cart till the Rahul transition happens or not. I think that's why they're getting into that whole groove and a vicious cycle.
That status quoism, entrenched status quoism of the Congress is a very, very important element to understand why the party doesn't move towards dramatic or visible change. But equally, I think Smita's point is very well taken. Personally, one meets any number of people still with the Congress who are utterly depressed and demoralized. And Dr. Naseer Hussain, that is my question to you. What should a Congress person feel about this list today?
See, I've been listening to all the other panelists here for quite some time. I think somebody mentioned that BJP's list saw some new faces and saw they didn't give second term, third term. Let me ask you: only three have come back. Only 3 out of 10 have come back to Rajya Sabha now. Only 3. 7 are first timers in Rajya Sabha. They have contributed to legislative business, maybe in the states and Lok Sabha. For the first time, they are there in Rajya Sabha. And second thing, see, Rahul Gandhi, after we lost the election in 2019, he said that I want to be, there should be some sort of an accountability and I don't want to continue as the president. He resigned. Then he said there will be a non-Gandhi. He wrote it in a letter. And then after that, there were several meetings and there was no consensus on anything. She had to step in as an interim president. So I think still, as somebody mentioned here, the biggest draws are the Gandhis in Congress Parivar, in the Congress party. Come what may, they are the biggest draws wherever they.
I mean, I think it's quite evident that unless there's a mutiny of some kind, unless there's a mutiny of some kind, that leadership issue seems to have been settled. I think that much we know. But Shruti, if I were to give you a quick last word, here's the question. Dr. Hussain says Sonia Gandhi stepped in as an interim president. If I'm not wrong, it's been more than 2 years that she's been an interim president. That is somewhere where people must wonder, the cadre must wonder, the Congress worker must wonder, how are we a party today without a full-time president?
I don't know about that, but because I don't know, I'm not in the Congress, so I can't say what people are thinking. But I think the only thing that can really revive, motivate, animate both Indian politics, but also particularly the Congress, which I think is desperately needed, is to actually a real campaign, a real protest movement, and a real show of spine against some of the quite dramatic changes that have been taking place in India for the last 4 or 5 years, which actually are rather dangerous for the future of India. And I think that's where it's at. Whether the institutional structure of the Congress can lie behind it, there will be collateral damage in terms of people wanting to leave. This is a moment. It will be a moment of churning. People are going to have to be in or out if they prefer their personal careers more than having to actually, sweat it out for some years. These are questions which will be answered both at the personal as well as at the kind of institutional level. You rightly said, I think that the leadership issue looks very decided, at least to me.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree on that. We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much. As they say, watch this space. I'm sure a lot more will happen in the weeks to come. Anita, sorry, you wanted to make a point before I was saying goodbye? Yeah, Anita.
On a lighter note on the leadership issue, I just remember a little anecdote. There was some rebellion in one of the state units, and one of the rebels came to meet a general secretary. And the general secretary kind of counseled him and said, one thing you must remember, that the Congress is the Nehru-Gandhi family. It's a family party, the Gandhi family party. He said, but for how long? He said, as long as it takes. So that's where it is.
Well, And I think, well, that debate will continue. Is the family the USP? Is the family the liability? Is the family the biggest advantage? And depending on your point of view, you'll have very different responses to that. But there is, of course, a verdict, an exam called the elections, and the Congress has critical elections coming up in Gujarat and Rajasthan in particular, where we have to see what happens next. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you soon. Thank you very much. Take care.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.